to strengthen.
Hello and welcome back. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a look at the top headlines. US launches airstrikes on ISIS targets in Syria after death of 2 American soldiers by ISIS on December 13 in Palmyra. US has dozens of targets tied to the ISIS attacked. Thousands of long-awaited Epstein files released. US Justice Department published the first batch of documents featuring Bill Clinton and Michael Jackson. Files show little mention of Trump. Jailed ex-Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan and his wife Bushra Bibi sentenced to 17 years in jail in the Toshkhana corruption case linked to corruption in sale of state gifts. UNO's government says 7 arrested over lynching of 27-year-old Hindu man in Bangladesh's Maiman Singh over blasphemy allegations. UNO said arrests follow the coordinated action by Rapid Action Battalion units. According to Ukrainian media, a Russian missile strike on port infrastructure near Ukraine's Black Sea city of Odessa late on Friday killed 7 people and wounded at least 15. Marco Rubio says no peace possible unless Hamas disarms, expresses confidence that countries will send troops to Gaza force. Meanwhile, Hamas says Miami talks must end Israel's violations. The UN Security Council has unanimously voted to extend the deployment of the UN's peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo for 1 year. Document shows an experienced China unit switches to local firm for wafer supplies. This is after the Dutch firm stopped supplying raw materials after corporate dispute. According to Ukrainian media, a Russian missile strike on port infrastructure near Ukraine's Black Sea city of Odessa last on Friday killed 7 people and wounded at least 15. Deputy Prime Minister Oleksiy Kuleba said that the attack involved ballistic missiles and targeted facilities critical to maritime trade. Preliminary information from Odessa regional authorities indicated the strike hit some areas in one of the 3 major ports serving the region. Odessa has remained a key hub for Ukraine's grain and commodity exports and has faced repeated Russian attacks since the Russia-Ukraine war began in 2022. Officials said the intensity of the strikes around Odessa has increased in recent days, frequently causing widespread power outages. A separate attack on Thursday damaged a bridge southwest of the city, severing a major transport route linking Odessa to the Danube port of Reni and disputing travel toward Moldova and Romania. Ukraine's government said it is coordinating with Moldovan authorities to establish alternative border routes. Moldova has set up temporary shelters at crossing points to assist travelers facing delays due to the attacks. All right, we're now joined in by Matty Zweig, who's a geopolitical expert, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Matty, how do you react to the latest round of strikes? Of course, the energy infrastructure continues to remain under attack, but this is really not helping in deterring any side from ending the war or coming to even a limited ceasefire.
Good morning, Kriti. I mean, this is something more of what has been happening since all the programs of Trump have been put on the table. I mean, the Russian side is advancing on the ground and it's getting more and more villages and areas that is going to complete more his vision of at least all the east of Ukraine in his hands. So, sorry, he continues to behave in the same way. And added to this, you have a constant also from the counteroffensive of Ukraine that is always hurting the Russians very far from their borders and not on the ground. It means in the southwest part of Russia with refinery places of the oil or factories or weapons-related factories, etc. And now also this bombardment with drones of the shadow fleet of Russia in the Mediterranean for the first time in front of Libya, very far from Ukraine. I mean, this is really getting, sorry for the word, nuts. The Russians, that they cannot believe that they are doing this to them. And this is another point that is adding to the national pride of Putin, that would like to get to the ceasefire with a completely surrendered Ukraine. So both sides are continuing in their efforts in the war and not in the ceasefire and not in the attempt of peace. And this is what is going on. And now these days also, the Europeans have the frozen assets from the Russians that they are in Europe, especially in the Euroclear Bank of Belgium, and about $90 billion for Ukraine to continue defending them and suiting their security concerns in about 70% of all their needs for the next 2 years even. So this is also adding fuel to the fire. But we have to remind that the Belgians said that they are not going to give this money to Ukraine if they are not going to have some back from the European Union in case they are sued for this money. So everything is a big mix of everything, but the real thing that is happening is that both sides are continuing with their efforts in war, and they are not really trying to get to a ceasefire, everyone from his reasons. And so this is very sad, but this is what is happening despite all these talkings in Miami, and now Trump changing his mind and putting also in these talks Europeans from several countries. And this is what it is. I mean, 90% of things, they have been agreed and under the table. But this 10% is a kind of gesture that someone is going to make to really sit and get at least a ceasefire, if not the end of the war.
All right. Matthew, also, how would you like to respond to the 90 billion loan package that the European Union has announced for Ukraine? Does this really help Ukraine, and will the country ever be able to repay that loan?
I think the Europeans themselves are telling Ukraine, we give you this money, the frozen from the Russians for you, and it's like a confiscation. And then you will have to pay it back only if you are going to be paid from the Russians after the end of the war in war reparations. So it's a kind of, twisted kind of humor, because this is not real. I mean, they are going to receive money that is not from them. This is also not from the Europeans. And they are going to pay back only if the Russians in the future are going to pay them for war damages. It's like saying, take the money and we'll think what happens in the future. That's exactly what is going on.
All right, Sean, no worries. Well, thank you, Matty, for your comment there, but I do request you to stay on as we proceed in the bulletin. Viewers, according to Palestinian media reports, Israeli airstrikes over the past 24 hours have killed at least 10 Palestinians in separate attacks in southern and northern Gaza. In southern Gaza, 4 people, including a woman, were killed in repeated airstrikes on the town of Bani Suhaila, east of Khan Yunis. In a separate incident on Friday evening, Palestinian media said Israeli forces struck a training center sheltering displaced civilians in the Tufa neighborhood of Gaza City. At least 6 people, including women and children, were reported killed. Rescue efforts were hampered as continued strikes and access restrictions prevented ambulances and civil defense teams from reaching the area, raising fears that the death toll could rise. The Israel Defense Forces confirmed carrying out strikes in Gaza City. In a statement, the IDF said its troops were operating in northern Gaza when they identified suspicious individuals and opened fire. The military added it was reviewing claims of civilian casualties linked to the incident. And I now request Matty Zweig to join us back into the discussion here. Matty, how do you see the ceasefire talks, likely to be proceeding? Of course, we know that second rounds of talks are due now in Miami. When the first round, the criteria that was to be met in the first round, including that of the return of the hostage bodies, those have not been met yet. One hostage's body is still there with Hamas that needs to be returned, and now we have the parties involved, the stakeholders are proceeding for round 2.
Okay, what you say round 2, you mean phase 2? Yes, everybody must get there, but if you are talking about what's going on, is that Israel has fulfilled all the points of this agreement and Hamas didn't fulfill it. And all the world is always talking about, look what Israel is doing, he's still attacking. But look, Israel deployed themselves to something called the yellow line. And this yellow line, that is about 40% of all the Gaza territory, it's a temporary area of containing, like a bumper area, so they can continue with all the phases, the second phase, as you say. And look what is going on. One body of deceased soldier didn't come back to Israel, and Israel thinks that the Hamas know where he is, but it's not doing any effort to give him back. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Anyway, this is a breach of the agreement. The second thing is that inside the yellow line, you have Israeli troops, but sometimes they are limited because of the agreement on doing all kinds of movements and taking care of all the terrorists that they are still inside or trying to get inside. So sometimes they are attacking from the air for not to move troops on the ground. And this is why they were attacking several terrorist movements from the air with the Air Force. And from the Hamas side, the second phase, it means dismantling themselves militarily, giving up all their weapons. They still are not willing to do that. And they also try to reinforce their grip in the Gaza populations and to be the power again, which is against what was agreed. Because what was agreed is a civilian government with different people, Arabs, Palestinians, and people from different countries in the world, even talking about putting troops there from Indonesia, Azerbaijan, and even Pakistan they are talking now. Even that 2 of these countries, they have no relationship with Israel, and Israel, by now, they didn't say anything against. So this is what's happening, and all this unrest is mainly because Hamas is not ready to fulfill their part, and they are partly backed of their sponsors, which means Iran and Qatar.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Matty, for your opinion and perspective and helping our viewers understand the situation in the Middle East. With that, viewers, we're now going to move on now to some news coming in from the United Nations. The UN Security Council has unanimously voted to extend the deployment of the UN's peacekeeping mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo for 1 year. This decision comes amid ongoing conflict in the region, with major Congolese cities like Goma and Bukavu falling to the anti-government M23 group. The mission consists of 11,500 military personnel, which has been endorsed by the US despite efforts to reduce UN peacekeeping costs under President Trump's administration. The US has called on Rwanda and M23 forces to honor a regional peace agreement, accusing them of sabotaging the peace process. Recently, M23 forces take control of Uvira, cutting off military support from Burundi. While the M23 has pledged to withdraw, concerns remain over the city's security, and nearly 90,000 refugees are expected to flee to Burundi. We have Dr. Levi Ndu, who's a political analyst, and he joins us from Johannesburg. Thank you, Dr. Indu, for joining us in this discussion. Do help our international viewers explain the current situation and how the M23 rebels are extending their warfare.
Greetings to you, greetings to the viewers at home. It is everybody's wish to see the end of conflict, the end of human rights violations, and indeed it is everybody's wish to see that there is peace. There has been issues that are raised that at least with the involvement of the US government, other interested parties, they want to see peace taking place before the end of 2025. The plan is to see peace and stability in ensuring that ordinary lives are restored and people start living their normal lives. That is everybody's wish. What we should expect is that all the major players in the conflict, in the war, in the human rights violations, should be able to come onto the table, find ways and means to be able to end the conflict and war. It has devastated a lot of people. It has misplaced women and children. A lot of people have lost their lives. And it will be in the best interest of humanity, the best interest of peace and stability in ensuring that the major role players in this conflict are able to come together and ensure that there is light at the end of the day, there is peace and stability, and indeed there is harmony.
Dr. Indu, how important do you think is the role of the United Nations? In today's time and age, there are several countries that are not even honoring the UN, declarations and statements and observations of the Secretary General. So is the UN statement and it urging parties to resort to peace going to have any real impact?
The United Nations is formed to ensure that there is peace and stability. The United Nations mandate is to intervene where there are conflicts and make sure that they bring peace. The United Nations should not just be an organization of declarations, an organization of speaking without action. We have seen in the recent past that the United Nations appears not to be strong enough or not having the muscle to bite where it matters most. And this is the time in which the world should see the value and the importance of the United Nations. When people are displaced, when there is peace and no peace, and when there is no stability, you expect the United Nations to intervene very quickly and ensure that they bring hope to the people that are frustrated by instability and fights amongst themselves.
All right, Dr. Indu, thank you for your comment there, but I requested to stay on as we move ahead. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also said that Washington's immediate goal on Sudan is to cessation of hostilities going into the new year that allows humanitarian organizations to be able to deliver assistance. Rubio, speaking to reporters at a press conference, said that countries are providing weaponry and equipment to the parties, including transshipment of weapons, particularly to the paramilitary rapid support forces. He added that the Trump administration has engaged with leaders of the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Egypt on Sudan. Last week, US President Donald Trump had said that he would intervene to stop the conflict between the army and the RSF, which erupted in April 2023 out of a power struggle and has triggered famine, ethnic killings and mass displacement in Sudan. Let's in fact listen into Rubio's statement.
On Sudan, you've rightfully outlined, there are regional elements to this. There are clearly both sides, the SAF and the RSF have supporters from outside of Sudan's borders that are involved, and we've been engaging with those countries. It's not just countries that are providing them weaponry and equipment, it's also countries that are providing transshipment, particularly to the RSF to receive weapons, in some cases advanced weaponry. Our goal right now in the short term, and what we've emphasized to everybody, including in my calls with leaders in the UAE, leaders in Saudi Arabia, we're very engaged in that. Our special envoy, Mossad Boulos, just returned from the region, meeting with the Egyptians, with the Saudis, with the UAE and others. We've also been in collaboration with the UK on some of this. Our goal, the immediate goal we have, is a cessation of hostilities, okay? A humanitarian truce going into the new year that allows humanitarian organizations to be able to deliver aid to the people in great distress. Right now, that's not possible. We are hearing, continue to see reports of humanitarian convoys actually being struck on their way in. And so you can just imagine what's amazing to us is these convoys are struck and the rest of the convoy continues. That's how committed these groups are.
All right, and I request Dr. Ndu to join us back into the discussion here. Dr. Ndu, now of course we know that Sudan is going to end its third year of the civil war. Do you think Trump's involvement is going to help arrive at peace there?
The conflict in Sudan has been going on for quite some time. Everybody who is interested in ensuring that there is peace and stability would love to ensure that Sudan has to go back to normality. We should appreciate the efforts that the United States is putting in ensuring that there is peace and stability. The unfortunate part is that a lot of people have been misplaced, and part of the bigger problem are issues that relate to ethnicity. My view is that you need a very strong commitment on the part of the Sudanese people, on the part of other role players like the other countries that are close by Sudan, who must play a role. And my view is that if the people that are involved in this conflict are also prepared to end the war, we can get a situation where there is an end to this war. Commitment is important, and indeed the desire for peace and stability would be able to bring peace that is desired not only by the Sudanese people but also by the international community.
How precarious is the situation really there, and how does the the seizure of the capture of the Heglig oil field affect the warring parties?
It has affected both parties in a very, very negative way. Already we're talking about over 11,000 people that are displaced. We're talking about ethnic conflict. And remember, when you've got ethnic conflict, you find victims of people who have no idea of what is going on or what has been the source of the conflict. You get people dying. You get government being unable to run its affairs. So this does affect the communities and the people there very, very negatively. And I think that is why most of the interested countries who wants to see peace and stability are putting all their efforts in ensuring that such has to come to an end, which will be in the best interest of humanity.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Liu, for joining us in this discussion and for speaking to us here at NewsX World. And with that, viewers, let's shift our focus. Now, Morgan Stanley is emerging as a leading contender for a key role in SpaceX's potential initial public offering. Sources familiar with the matter say that the bank's long-standing relationship with SpaceX chief executive Elon Musk gives it an edge as the selection process gets underway. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan are among a small group of banks competing for a senior underwriting role, though no final decision has been made. The discussions remain fluid and the IPO is still dependent on market conditions, meaning plans could be delayed or scrapped. In a recent staff memo, SpaceX's chief financial officer said the company was preparing for a possible public offering in 2026, which could raise more than $25 billion and rank among the largest listings ever. And that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.